Good evening, councillors, members of the public and staff present in person and online and watching online this evening. The time being 6:30 p.m., I declare the Strategy and Policy Committee of 9th June 2026 open. This meeting will be conducted under the provisions of the Local Government Act 1993 and Council adopts Code of Conduct of Meeting Practice. Specific persons in the gallery are advised they may not record the proceedings of a meeting of a council or a committee without the authorization of the council or committee. Mobile phones must be turned off or to silent as not to disrupt the meeting. Using mobile phones or recording meeting, whether audio or visual, is prohibited. This meeting is live streamed and a recording will be made available on council website to allow the community to follow council debates and decisions. Members of the public attending agree to have their image, voice, personal information including name and address recorded and publicly be broadcasted. Strathfield Council does not accept any liability or defamatory remarks or inappropriate comments that are made during the course of the meeting. Any part of the meeting that is held in closed sessions will not be streamed. Councillors, I would remind you of your obligation to faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of your ability and judgment. As a chair, I will call you to order should there be need to do so. I would like to ask everyone who is able to stand, please stand for the moment of reflection. We pray that our deliberations today will be objective and decisions are impartial and made for the benefit of the whole community. Recognition of traditional custodians. Let us begin by acknowledging the Wongal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this meeting is being held. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Please take your seat. There is one apology from our Mayor, Councillor Benjamin Kai, and he has requested for a leave of absence. Are there any further leave of absence? Sorry, it's written there. Okay, and there are no requests for attendance in audio-visual link as well. Disclosure of interest. Does any of the councillors would wish to make a disclosure of interest?
Point of order. Are we going to vote about a leave of absence? You don't need to.
You don't need to for this one.
It's policy and strategy meeting.
I request that each of the councillor with a conflict of interest, conflict stance, clearly state the item, the nature of the conflict and what action they will be taking.
So PE1, I'll declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary conflict of interest. As previously, I am employed and work in the town centre of Strathfield. I know business owners and land owners in the town centre of Strathfield, but I will be staying in the room and voting on the matter.
Any other councillors? So we'll move to confirmation of minutes. Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, 12 May 2026. I move it. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pennsylvania. Councillors, all those in favour, can we vote? Carried out unanimously. Reports to Council. Councillors, you are reminded that the Strategy and Policy Committee terms of reference allow for the discussion of each matter prior to debate and voting on the recommendations for the matter. I will introduce each matter, invite the relevant staff officer to present and supplementary information, and then provide an opportunity for councillors to ask any questions. Councillors, we have our first report, draft Strathfield Town Centre Master Plan, presentation of proposed planning framework. I would like to ask Paul Reid, Director of Planning and Environment, to present the council report.
Good evening, councillors. Before we begin and Minister comes and presents, I just want to first acknowledge the significant amount of work that has gone into bringing this piece of work to this point. It's not a simple piece of work. It's involved detailed modelling, feasibility testing and coordination right across all our consultants and also across a number of disciplines. In particular, I just want to thank Rita, who has led this piece of work on behalf of Council, as well as our specialist consultants who are online tonight. We've got Scott Davis, who you all know from Hassel, and Jenny Rudolph from Jenny Rudolph Planning, who are technical specialists, and a lot of their input has actually shaped what you'll see tonight. Tonight's presentation, like we have told you about, is going to provide an overview of the proposed planning framework that forms part and will form part of the draft Strathfield Town Centre Master Plan. It's important to note that this is an interim step. This presentation is for your noting, and the feedback from councillors will be considered in the development of the final draft master plan that will be coming to you in August. In terms of next steps, we will return in July, SPC meeting with a further presentation on option 3, which is specifically the undergrounding that council requested us to go away and look at, and the team have been going through all of that detail. And then in August, we'll bring the full suite of documents of the draft master plan back to council, hopefully for endorsement to go on public exhibition for 3 months. For tonight's discussion, the key members of the team are online. We have Peter Barnett from Noel Shaw as our property advisor, and he has been here before, and he'll continue to do so until the project completes. Thank you for that. In the meantime, I'll hand over to... Peter's going to just come and provide a couple of words on property.
Thanks very much, Paul, and good evening, everyone. So I've been along for this journey on the master plan project since the beginning. The project's being undertaken in accordance with a probity plan that was developed in the very early stages of the process, which identifies how probity risks are to be identified and managed. So I've been providing advice along the way and attending and observing various processes and meetings. So I'm not going to run through all of the points on the slide, but just let me touch on a couple of things. So really what we're looking at with probity is ensuring that a project is defensible, that it will withstand scrutiny from an ethical perspective. So it's a process that is accountable and transparent, fair and impartial, that conflicts of interest are managed, that confidential information is protected, and that value for money outcomes are pursued. And those kinds of principles I hear constantly in the language of council, and I've heard those things tonight. So just a quick word about one particular aspect of probity, and that relates to conflicts of interest. So I've got 3 observations to make. Firstly, we are often not the best judges of our own conflicts. We often need to consult with someone, take someone's perspective on it. So that's something I advise all of my clients. If you feel you have a conflict, speak to someone within the organisation, speak to the appointed expert and take their view. Secondly, conflicts are a fact of life. I have conflicts and it's important that they are recognised as such and declared. A declared conflict is often not a problem. They often can be managed. An undeclared conflict, if it surfaces, can often be really problematic. So those are my three observations, my three pearls of wisdom that I share with all of my clients about conflicts of interest. And with that, I'm going to hand to Rita. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I'm just going to run through a couple of slides on the planning framework. So I suppose the first point I'd like to make, and particularly for anyone watching online, that this is a draft planning framework, and we have no responsibility as council because they're currently drafts. So in terms of anyone making any commercial decisions in relation to any of the properties that we're presenting on tonight, just be aware that these are draft controls. They'll go into the master plan for exhibition, and then there's a whole other process that comes after that in terms of the planning framework. So just in terms of the agenda, and as Paul mentioned, we've got Scott and Jenny online. So they've been working on this in the background. So we're going to look at the background to the draft planning framework, some of the considerations that we've looked at as part of pulling the draft planning framework together. I'm going to touch on floor space ratio and height, which are important in the context of a planning framework. Then I'm going to run through the key site provisions, which is what the master plan is looking at presenting. We're specifically calling out the proposed parking requirements because we thought they're important, portable and key worker housing, and then lightly touch on the development control plan, which won't form part of the master plan, but will come after, should council endorse the master plan following the public exhibition. Now, in terms of questions, happy for questions to be taken during the presentation or then to the end. I'll leave that up to the councillors. So in terms of the background, so we've been working on developing a draft planning framework which will form part of the draft master plan. So it'll sit within the master plan, but it won't actually enact any of the changes to the planning framework. So in terms of the planning framework, we've got a local environmental plan, which includes our development standards, and those are things like height and floor space ratio. And then there's also a development control plan, which are the guidelines that we use when we're assessing a development application. So that all forms part of the planning framework, but what we're presenting tonight will form part of the master plan as part of an implementation plan that will go on exhibition as part of the master plan. So in terms of what comes next, I think it's really important. So once council has been through the process of the master plan, and should council endorse the master plan following the public exhibition, council will then need to resolve, if it wants to enact the planning framework, a resolution to prepare a planning proposal. So that will come after this process. So in terms of what we've considered as we've moved through this process in relation to the town centre are a number of issues and considerations. So obviously feasibility, and we've looked at the feasibility of the existing controls in the LEP, and what we think is restricting or stopping development in the town centre. So those key controls, known as development standards, relate to floor space ratio, the height of buildings, and also a local provision which we have in our LEP, which is clause 6.8, which essentially restricts residential development in the town centre to 35% of the overall floor space. So we think that's a key constraint that's been restricting development in the town centre. As part of this piece of work, we've also looked at the constraints that apply to the centre, and as I've mentioned previously, flooding is one of those key constraints, and this visual indicates the extent of flooding in the town centre.
No, Rita. Just a question, like that document that we're seeing there, did we conduct a flood study, or was this like from...
So as part of this work, our sub-consultants did do some work on flooding, and as part of the master plan suite of documents, that study will come forward as part of that. So council will be looking at that and endorsing that, and that will go on exhibition. But it's only a detailed flood study that relates to the town centre, so it's not the extent, because council has undertaken an extensive study. This only relates to the town centre. Some of the other things that I'll run through, so we've got what's called the PANSOPS, which is the flight restriction in terms of height of buildings, the apartment design guide, heritage, fragmented land ownership and strata title development, and also the New South Wales state government planning pathways. So in terms of the PANSOP, so what this does is it restricts the height of buildings across Sydney in terms of Kingsford Smith Airport. We haven't got the Aerotropolis PANSOPs yet, but it essentially is the maximum height that a building or a crane can go to within that area. So for Strathfield, the maximum height's about 170 metres from natural ground level, so no building can exceed that height. So that is a constraint because we can't go any higher than that.
And how many stories is that?
Oh, Scott, how many stories would that be? Sorry.
40, 50.
47?
40 floors, 50 floors between there.
It would be circa 50 stories.
50.
Tallest building at the moment in Strathfield is like 30 stories.
Yes, nowhere near that. So yeah, and that, so any application that comes close to that height restriction gets referred to CASA, which is the Commonwealth Air Services, for comment. So essentially, in terms of what we're looking at with the draft framework, these are the heights that we're looking at and the PANSOPS limits on the screen. So and it differs, so if you look at the range, so as the closer you get to the airport, the lower that height is. Makes sense. Then we've got the New South Wales Department Design Guide. So there's a number of criteria that we have to take into consideration there when we're looking at modelling a building. Things like solar access, building separation, the overall height of that building, they're all taken into consideration, and when we're assessing a development application, the planners need to address the requirements of the apartment design guide. So as part of the modelling, Hassel has also looked at that and how that impacts on the actual bulk of a building and how we can achieve those separation and solar access requirements. Then another key constraint in the town centre is existing strata titled sites. So this visual here just shows all those sites. Now most of those are over 25 strata units, and we've looked at the ownership of all of those, and most of those are less than 10% in one ownership. So I think we had one that was around 30% one ownership. But what that means is for one of those sites to tick over, because there's a number of strata units, a developer or an owner would need to at least acquire a minimum of 75% before they can extinguish the strata on that property.
Yes, sorry, a question in relation to that slide as well, Rita. So in the original, our frame area that we had, and I think I touched on it previously, there's the properties on between Redmire Road and Margaret Street. So they're in the frame area that we're looking at for the town centre, but we haven't was there any reason that they weren't included?
So when the original town centre master plan boundary was endorsed, they were outside of that initial area and within the frame area. So we haven't specifically included it. So the frame area wasn't the area that we were looking at as part of the study. But we can bring that back as part of the draft master plan if the councillors want us to have a look at that.
I thought that area, from memory, was, I don't have the map here, so I don't...
Yeah, so if it was part of the frame area, councillors, it wouldn't have been that we only identified, because we also identified as part of the frame area, the area that's within the Burwood LGA. So that wasn't part of the defined study area, it was just outside, and that's why it was defined as the frame area. But we can have a look at that and we can bring that back as part of the draft master plan should the councils want that area. And what I would suggest is maybe we extend the boundary, or council resolve to extend the boundary to include those properties.
Unfortunately we don't have the map here, but you can see the map actually does start going down to where
Yeah, so they're those areas to the south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a new thing. I think it was there. So, and that's almost 7,000 square metres of property there. So we're saying there's constraints because of the ground title stuff. But correct, I could be wrong, Rena. Yeah, my memory had that pocket was included.
Yeah, because the frame area essentially extended from Redmire South and then Burwood, and then to the north into the Canada Bay, Burwood LGA, and then we had that area to the west of Pilgrim. That was outside of the actual study area. But we can.
Is that picture we've got here, just that portion, is that from that original?
So the actual study area
Is that
that boundary there.
Yeah.
But
so what I'm just saying on that picture, like on the bottom of that picture, how far does that go down?
I would have to check that, councillor, and come back. Yeah.
I just can't. Yeah, it's just. I just thought that was included, so that's just why I've got a question about it.
I do recall extending it into that area at one of the discussions.
I don't think we extended it. I think it was
already part of
that was there. I think there was mention about looking at other areas, but I think the original frame area had those units.
Yeah, so it's always been part of the frame area, but not specifically part of the study area.
Yes, we can request now that we do what those reviews.
Yeah, no, I just wanted
Yeah.
to.
So probably the suggestion would be that maybe that area be included in the study area. So then, councillors, were there any other questions in relation to the constraints around the strata? So in terms of how we measure floor space and height, so there are controls within the LEP, as I've mentioned, the development standards. So for an applicant to vary the height or the floor space, they're required to put in what's called a 4.6 justification, and that's a process that they've got to go through and we've got to go through when we're assessing. So essentially both those controls, height and FSR, relate to the development capacity and what can be developed on the site. So essentially they create the box that is the site. So they work together to shape the outcome, and a taller building might not automatically mean more density and vice versa. So usually the density would override the floor space ratio, and then it's what you can fit within that box. So in terms of how it works within our planning framework, so we've got a map, which that's an indicative map on the screen showing the height of buildings, and what it shows is those baseline heights. So when a planner or when an applicant is looking at the height and FSR, they'll generally go to the map, they'll look at the key, and that will determine what height or what floor space ratio a person can do on their site. In terms of how we calculate height, so height in the LEP is generally determined in metres. We don't refer to them as stories. In looking at the town centre, we've got differing heights for each level of the building. So obviously a commercial, ground floor commercial will have a higher floor to floor height or a floor to ceiling height. And then your podium might have a greater height, and then your residential levels. So All of those added up together, depending on how many commercial or retail floors you have and how many residential floors, will give you the total number in metres, but you can also determine the stories, and that's why we generally refer to it in metres. So that just gives an indication. So what we're looking at is a 6 metre floor to floor for the ground floor, so that's generally retail. Then a 4 metre floor to floor ceiling height for the podium, which could be office commercial. And then for your residential, we're looking at a 3.2 metre floor to floor height. And then obviously you've got your plant and everything else. So what we try and do is we try and incorporate that into the overall height, because any encroachment to that overall height requires the applicant to go through that process of a 4.6 variation. So what we're looking at as part of the controls for the town centre, and it's slightly different to what we currently have, is we're proposing baseline controls, so they're the controls that will be on the map in the LEP as a baseline. So if someone is looking at a site, they'll go to the map for the height and the floor space, and they'll see that, okay, well this is the height I can go to and this is the floor space I can go to. We'll also look at having incentive provisions. So what these incentive provisions are is if you do a bit more as an applicant, you can get a bit more in terms of height and FSR. So essentially it's a pathway for council to encourage redevelopment, with the applicant also providing some community benefit. Now, the way we did that in the past, before a lot of the state government reform, was if an applicant came to council and wanted more height or FSR than what was in the LEP, we could generally push back as council and say, well, we're not going to support that. In some cases, an applicant would then come to council and say, well, council, if I provided a public benefit, would you then support a greater height in FSR? And if council supported that, then we would enter into a planning agreement. That framework has basically dissolved with state significant development. It's much more difficult now because they go through what's called the Housing Development Authority. That process doesn't allow us to negotiate a voluntary planning agreement. Or the applicant generally won't come to council because they're getting what they want from the state government. So doing it this way, it's all transparent, it's all clear. We're essentially saying to the applicant, if you do certain things, and that might be something as simple as amalgamating a site and delivering an amount of commercial floor space, then you're going to get additional height and FSR in doing that. So there's
still negotiations that can be made.
But it's all transparent in that it will all be written into the local environment plan. The council endorse this framework.
Right.
So a developer will pick up the LEP and they will know that if they want to trigger the higher height and FSR, they need to deliver whatever the provisions are for that site. And the provisions differ from site to site.
Is there a risk with some of the shorter building sites we've assigned that they'll just go to state government anyway? And they get more from them?
Well,
Well, all the key sites that we've identified, they'll be able to get increased height and FSR if they deliver what the community benefit is stated. So that will be locked into the LEP and they won't be able to vary that.
Well, I guess the question is,
Yeah, no.
well, I guess like just to extend Rory, Councillor Nosworthy's question, is what we are offering going to compete with what the state can actually offer them? Because if we're going to say community benefit will get 50 metres, for example, and then the HDA comes around and says, well, you can have, according to the HDA, 70 metres, why would we get, there's a chance we get no community benefit.
Look, I think sorry, councillor.
Sorry, just a similar question.
Yeah.
Like just as an example, like the plaza site, like my understanding, I don't know, again, HDA, the limit they have is the panops for their height, is that, like?
So that's the maximum height they can go to.
Yeah, so they could, like we're offering them lower than that, we're offering them lower FSR, than some of the other sites in the area, so why would they come to, that's what I was, like, why would they come to council if they can get a better outcome to go to HDA?
So just from experience, the HDA has recently undertaken a review. So they're looking at becoming more stringent in what they're allowing these applications to go through. And one of the criteria they are looking at is, for example, the Homebush Todd precinct, where they've got a plan that's been endorsed, in the last 2 years. Moving forward, they don't want applications going above and beyond unless they can deliver some additional community benefit. So there's less support, and what we're seeing as council officers is there are less applications now going through the HDA. So this essentially is a starting point. So in terms of the detail around each of those key sites, what we're hoping for, because we haven't heard from the plaza site, and really it's a critical site in the town centre. Hopefully this will be a starting point when this goes on exhibition for them to come and have a dialogue with us. And essentially how this usually works is if they're not happy with what council has endorsed and put on exhibition, they'll go away and do their own work and come back with an alternative. And I suppose that's what we're wanting from them. So we don't want to give them everything in the first instance. We want them to go away and do their own work if they're interested and come back and say, look, council, we think we can get X and Y. And then we would say to them, well, what are you going to deliver for that extra height and FSR? Because essentially we don't want to be giving away
Community benefit.
development potential for no community benefit. And I suppose that is the critical message here. So we don't want to be giving that away. We want them to come to the party and say to us, well, what you've proposed, council, is feasible, but we think we can get more and we think we can give the community more. So that's the whole premise of the incentive provisions.
So you're like what you're saying, Rita, correct me if I'm wrong, is basically we put this out for exhibition, the plaza obviously gets notified that it's on exhibition, they might have a look at it, they might come back in that exhibition period and say that we think there's a better outcome, and it's at that point when it comes back.
So then, how that would work is, so we go through that exhibition phase, and as part of that exhibition phase, we would be trying to work closely with those landowners at the key sites to get them to at least respond to what we've proposed. Obviously, during that submission period, we'd be reviewing the submissions and we'd be working with Hassel and Jenny to respond to what they provided to us. We would then bring that back to council with a recommendation to either support or not support, and then council would make that decision. So we would bring everything back to the councillors to make that decision. But we'd be pressing them really hard, like we're not just going to let them get additional height and FSR for no community benefit.
Were you, I can't remember, Rita, were you here when they had their planning proposal, which we
I'd left
rejected?
by then, yeah.
Yeah.
19.
Because it does look similar, like the pictures we've drawn look similar to their.
Well, some of their team that worked on that one are now working on the HDA, the SSDA proposal for Asperia. So we've been talking to them as well in relation to that previous proposal. But I suppose the challenge here is getting the landowners to come and talk to council as part of this process, because if we don't hear from them, we don't know. So just, if there's no more questions, I might just go through each of the key sites.
Yeah.
So we're proposing 8 key sites in the town centre, and they're essentially those sites that we consider to be underdeveloped or not developed at the moment. Each of those key sites, some of those key sites look at the amalgamation of other sites. So for example, site 5 is the amalgamation of council site with the adjoining sites. Most of the sites can be developed within themselves. I suppose there's only a couple of sites where we're looking at the amalgamation of those sites. So where there's an amalgamation, it's generally more difficult for those owners to come together.
Just a question, Rita. When you say underdeveloped, of course we know what you mean, but potential, but a lot of the neighbouring sites that might have there's potential in them as well, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm curious as to the process of sort of rationalising what is underdeveloped and by what standards.
So in terms of just going back to the strata titled, I don't know.
But is that the only impediment then, because they're strata titled?
Yeah, essentially that is the key restriction. The time that it takes to be able to acquire 75% of those developments, particularly in this current market, would take a very long time.
But that's logistically speaking not an us problem though. It's a private owner's problem.
Correct, but in terms of preparing a master plan where we can actually see some redevelopment in the short to medium term, by requiring those sites to have to amalgamate with, say, a strated site would be difficult. And just in my experience, and we've done some analysis just using our ownership records, and as I said, the greatest number is around 30% in one unit block where you've got one owner. That's not to say there couldn't be more, because in my experience what I've found is you might have one owner with different companies, owners, and again the way to draw them out is to put the plan on exhibition. And that was very much my experience when I was doing the Burwood North master plan. We had a number of developers come out of the woodwork during the exhibition period and tell us that they owned 80% of a development that we didn't look at, which then allowed us to go back and review that. So I suppose in this case, if we go on exhibition and, for example, we get one of the blocks, the owners coming out and saying, well, I own 70%, we would then go back and review that as part of a key site provision, because there would be potential in the short to medium term that block of units would turn over.
I think on that, Rita, like for example, if there's one where they said, okay, here's your FSR, here's your incentive if you develop your site, and you give council some community benefit or whatever the benefit to council is, but that's like short term to do that, yeah. But then, they might not, like that might not be one that will be developed now. But I think having, can we not have an option where you say, okay, that's the current thing. Okay, if you go with this guy, you get X amount. But then if you all go together, you get like really, really significant uplift. But it will take long, and it will be someone has to acquire that to have it like that long. Because like for me, if we're doing this, like I don't want to just say, hey, boom, boom, boom. We're saying, okay, August, whatever. I don't think this should just be rushed through when it's probably like one of the the biggest things that this council term's going to do. So I just think that I don't want to look at just like say 5-10 years. Like we need to be looking like 50 years down the track. If you look at, for example, Regal Court, like that was developed many like 25 years ago, whatever it was. understandable that's not feasible for development because of the size of it. But the thing is, in a way, that's kind of actually protected that part of Strathfield because it's already been built. It's 15 stories. You know, like we're looking at it, we're saying, hey, you know, 170 metres, 156 metres, we're saying, wow, that's crazy. We don't know in 50 years they're building, you know, like 300 metre buildings. So the thing is, if we have a good long-term plan here, it actually kind of protects, in a way, it also protects the area from like ridiculous, crazy development like 50 years down the track. Because then those ones will be like the Regal Court now. It won't be feasible.
Yeah, I think the issue with that, councillors, would be modelling the feasibility with those sites, because all of this is based obviously on the economic feasibility. So it'd be the cost to acquire the land, the cost to redevelop. So when you're looking at the cost to purchase, say, 256 stratas, it would be difficult then to come up with a height and FSR. Yeah. What I would suggest though, and like I said, so what would happen, so say we had one of those, say we had Block 8 come back to us during the exhibition and go, you know what, I own 75% of that block. I want to be able to develop to this height and FSR. Would council consider that? So as part of the post-exhibition reporting and review, we would look at that and undertake an assessment of that, and then we would bring that back to council and say, look, councillors, we think this should be included at this height and FSR to deliver this community benefit. The reason being is you've got a high proportion of those units in one ownership. But to be able to forecast, say, 20 years down, I mean, we can't even forecast 12 months down the track at the moment with what's going on with the state government and what their, you know, changes to their planning reform. So I suppose for us it's getting the plan out there, getting it on exhibition so that we can understand from these landowners, you know, what they're thinking, and particularly with these sites that are strata titled, whether or not there are any owners in there that own a major proportion of those sites. So that's our challenge.
And that's
I think we're trying to, like, I don't know, like, we're trying to say, like, create that market that people will come in and take that building over and demolish it. Mm-hmm. And, like, for example, there's the one on the corner of the Raw Square, mm-hmm. There, and then there's a building next to it which is, like, old, ugly, looks terrible. So we've given incentive to the one on the corner, and we've sort of just ruled out the one next door. Why shouldn't there be a second option of saying, well, look, that's what you get, but you know what, if you got next door, hey, you're going to get this, and incentivise them to actually redevelop the whole site. And hey, if you got the other one, number 3 on this here, or like that's like 133 lots, hey, if you got that, well, wait, good work, Mr. Builder, and we'll give you a really, really big bonus, and also you got to give us this to the community and whatever. Like that's what. Like to me, that's like that's visionary, long-term planning. I don't know, like 133 lots. Of course, it's like hard for someone to buy, but there is examples. You know, there's examples close by where people have bought up whole buildings, 30 units, 40 units.
And I guess that was my point earlier, which is that, you know, we seem to be impeded by a logistical issue that's someone else's issue, not ours. So if we want to come up with a vision for the town centre, why should we fall short of prescribing what could be possible and letting someone else do the work? And if they're willing to do the work, then there's an outcome for it and a potential community benefit. If no one's willing to do it, well, we're okay with things as they are, but there's potential there for something else.
I suppose, and I might hand over to Scott, but the issue in terms of developing a master plan comes down to undertaking that feasibility and that assessment. To do that work on a block that might have 100 strata units would be really difficult to identify what a good outcome would be. Scott, did you want to add anything?
Sorry, the audio is dropping in and out quite a bit. But what I might say is that the feasibility analysis that has been undertaken, given today's conditions, has suggested that in some circumstances, redevelopment of some sites is not a feasible or a viable proposition, or to enable that development to do so, it would be substantially large and exceed some of the constraints that we have, such as the PANZOPS limits that Rita has outlined this evening. That's not to say that some of those items can't be considered, but what we've been focused on are the sites that are most likely to have some development associated with them in the medium term.
Can I ask something? When I read your report, the Strathfield householders, half of them, almost 49.1% of households have experiencing housing stress. And we are giving them lots of incentives of 30% to 70% increase. And all this, why the master plan requires only 2 and 4% of affordable housing, while allowing increase a lot of FSR from 30 to 70%, some of them height 161 meters. So is there any reason?
Again, Councillor and Scott might be able to add to this. It comes down to the feasibility. So our experts who've done all the analysis have identified that not all the buildings could support provision of affordable housing or housing for key workers. Where it can be supported in terms of the feasibility, we've written that in as an incentive. So, for example, Strathfield Plaza, we're looking at 2% of the overall gross floor area to be delivered as either affordable housing or housing for key workers, and that being delivered in perpetuity. So I suppose that's a difference, because with the state policy at the moment, it's only 15 years and then they revert back to market. What we're looking at is any units that are delivered as either affordable housing or housing for key workers are delivered by the developer in perpetuity, and they're managed by a community housing provider in perpetuity.
Can I ask why that is? So just to understand that, are we saying that we're doing a lower percentage than the state's normal prescription, but the trade-off is that it's a perpetuity rather than a fixed term?
Correct.
That's the...
Yes.
This site seems to be the biggest, but doesn't have the biggest affordable housing provision. So, where's the link between?
So essentially, in terms of affordable housing or housing for key workers is only one component of that public benefit. So in order to get everything, something's got to give and take.
So you're saying like they need a better public area, but then they get less, for example?
Affordable housing.
Yeah. So we've tried to balance it. And with this one, you know, you're looking at enough to get that. So if you look at the baseline, so the baseline is what they get without doing anything. And essentially what's restricting them or what's putting them off doing that is, you know, it's a lower FSR and it's a lower height, and also the residential component. But if they want to get that higher FSR of 9.75, go to approximately 156 metres and get 70% residential across the site, they've got to deliver all those proposed incentives. So looking at 7,000 square metres of commercial floor space, a publicly accessible link through Churchill through to Redmire, so it's a massive block, so it's connecting through. Community infrastructure, and we haven't quantified or identified what that community infrastructure is. Publicly accessible parking, so there's a current approval on that site which provides for publicly accessible parking. We're looking at that being retained as part of any redevelopment, and then 2% affordable or key worker housing delivered in perpetuity. I suppose that is the key difference, Councillor, because 15 years it reverts back to market accommodation.
Is perpetuity maybe too long? Forever.
Perpetuity's forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's delivering, there is a need in the Strathfield LGA, and particularly around housing for key workers. I mean, we just have to look at all the skills that we've got. So providing some affordable housing within most of these developments is probably beneficial.
Do you think it's a bit, like in that town centre, there's units that, 2-bedroom units rent over $1,000 a week? Like, I think it's a bit, like, it's not really genuine to say that it's really going to be that affordable.
Well, if they're managed by a community housing provider, the community housing provider sets the rent.
But isn't it just like a discount from?
No, there's a formula that they use, so it's for low and very low income households, and the rents are set at that, and it's managed by the community housing provider. So the developer doesn't manage it, council doesn't manage it, it's managed by the community housing provider. And so they basically allocate. We can identify, for example, that we only want it to be allocated to people who might live or work in Strathfield, and then the community housing provider allocates it based on that criteria.
So the 2%, would so that's owned by the builder? Would that be?
It's retained by the developer, because we don't want to become property developers. The developer then hands it over, so there will be a condition on their title to say X amount of units are identified as affordable housing and must be managed by a community housing provider. So essentially they can't sell those units.
We have separated the organisation.
So,
Yeah, the community housing provider.
Yeah. And we can, I mean, council can specify where, obviously they're not going to dedicate the penthouse as affordable housing for key workers, but we as council can specify where in that development and the number of bedrooms. So if we want, a proportion of 3-bedroom units being provided as affordable housing, council can state that as part of this work.
How would it let's say the builder doesn't want to retain any ownership in the building? Like, how would that work with affordable housing?
Well, generally they can allocate it to a community housing provider, and the community housing provider then the community housing provider manages it. In some cases, a community housing provider can purchase and manage.
So if we didn't have that provision in there, what's the requirement for affordable housing?
No.
But you're saying this with the state government 15 years.
They don't have to provide any.
Yeah.
Because the only area that we have the affordable housing scheme is in the Homebush Todd precinct. So within the Homebush Todd, it's mandated, but anywhere else across the LGA, it's not. So what we're saying that, okay, we're giving you a greater FSR height and residential proportion.
We want affordable housing.
As part of the incentive.
So affordable housing can only be incentivized.
But Esther, if we're asking them for, to me, if we're asking them to retain, there's 475 car spots in there, in that building now, which are supposed to be community access, whatever. My feel on that side would be the priority is to ensure we get those car spots over anything else.
And that's what we're looking at, so that it'll be publicly accessible car parking.
Yeah.
The numbers to be determined, but there will be a proportion of car parking within that development that is publicly accessible to the community.
Your report say that car parking space on the apartment, your new apartment, you reduced the parking store to one bedroom 0.5, 0.9. So I was wondering whether you have council undertakes any modeling to assess the impact of the reduced parking rates on surrounding residential streets like near Churchill Avenue, Alliance Avenue, all these. How people can park.
So Councillor, I might touch on that. That's at the end of the presentation. presentation where we talk about parking, but I'll come back to that.
Alright.
Were there any other questions
Yeah.
around? Yep.
Can I go back a bit to the strata sites?
Yeah.
Presumably we have to do feasibility before we do a master plan? So that's the barrier to including them?
So yeah, if we were to include any of those sites, if councillors wanted us to look at the sites that were strated, we would have to go back and do that work.
Can't just kind of draw a skyline and go, that's what we'd like.
The problem with doing that is that we potentially could misalign the height and FSR. And essentially we don't want to be giving developers a benefit without them providing a community benefit. I mean, this is very much the premise of the master plan, is we want development in the town centre. We want the town centre to be livable, you know, a great place to live.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we need that benefit
So
provided.
just so for understanding, so for example, if the plaza, we said, okay, currently there's 475 spots, we want you to provide those spots minimum back to the council. There's then a clause in the LEP that says, like, can council put a clause in the LEP that says, like, does it identify that site, and then the clause says you have to provide the 475 spots to get the incentive, like how is it that specific or is?
Yes, it would be a provision in the LEP, so it would be the incentive provision in the LEP. It would be more around stating the number of publicly available spaces, where those spaces are, and negotiating the terms of that would be done through the DA process.
It's like those sort of things very, very clear.
Yeah, so we would,
in the
for
LEP.
example, we would state that, you know, they'd need to be able to trigger the incentive provisions, they'd need to provide X amount of square metres as commercial floor space, they'd need to provide the through-site link. So for example, the through-site link, that might be an open link, that might be an arcade, that's something we would work through as part of the development assessment process. Publicly accessible parking, we might quantify that in the LEP, but how that then is managed wouldn't be in the LEP. That's something we would negotiate and we would condition as part of the development consent. Very similar to what's happened now, but, you know, there are ways we can do things now that you mightn't have been able to do 10 years ago.
That's my main concern,
Yeah.
because
So
I know
for
there's,
example, affordable housing, we would get them to put that on the title.
yeah,
So it'd always be on the title, so if they sold a unit that was identified as affordable housing, the person purchasing that unit would know that it's affordable housing. Because
And
there's a restriction on the title.
in your experience, you're saying, if we've got this plan done and we've got the LEP amendment made, that you think there's,
I'll come out of the woodwork.
can they bypass us? That's,
My only disclaimer to that is, when we're doing the planning proposal to draft up these provisions, that goes to the department, it goes to parliamentary council. Parliamentary council and the department might come back to council and say, we don't accept that as a provision in the LEP. We might have an issue then. But generally, in my experience, it's more a matter of how we word that provision for parliamentary council to accept that to go into the LEP. And I mean, other councils have done this. There are plenty of examples, and Jenny can point to that, which is why we're proposing this incentive-based framework, because it's been successful in other councils, and other councils are getting the delivery of that community benefit through the incentive provisions.
okay. Because I like, for example, the one next to the petrol station, Albert Road, Pilgrim, like we had, when it came to council, we made the developer, they have to provide us parking, they have to provide an easement through the other property, they have to provide units in ownership to council. But from my understanding is that because they've bypassed council, gone to HDA, that we lose all that benefit.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my fear.
That can't happen now.
We want to make sure that doesn't happen, and that they can't bypass us and get away with not providing things to the community.
And I suppose what we are doing as part of that, and we're doing that with all our applications that are going through the state significant pathway is we are making submissions at every opportunity. We are pushing the department, and we've had meetings with the minister to push the department to allow us to go into negotiations with the developer to deliver some form of public benefit. Because essentially they're getting development benefit for nothing, not providing anything back to our community. Council officers and the exec have been pushing very hard, and we've had a couple of meetings with the minister and executive directors of the department to push for a change in that. And we're not the only council. I mean, other councils are also pushing, and I think that has been the trigger for the review of the Housing Delivery Authority framework. So now they're looking more around strategic merit, and you know, developers are asking, because a developer can go in there and basically ask for double what they've got. Yeah, and not provide anything back to the community. So there is a frustration with the framework currently. Councils are pushing back, and you know, it's for the benefit of our communities. We don't want our communities living in places that are not supported by the community infrastructure that's required. And so I suppose, yeah, what we're hoping for with the master plan, if we can get it on exhibition, then it's an entry to talking to these landowners. Because at the moment, why would they come to us? That we've got nothing to present to them. This will be an opportunity for them to come to us and say, you know, good job, but we think we can get more. And we'd be pushing back and saying, well, okay, maybe you can get more, but what are you going to deliver to the community to get more?
So you're saying the quicker we get this out, the better?
Well, I think it needs to be out there.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be something
out there as an incentive for the developers.
Well, for them to be able to come to us and say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree, and these are the reasons why we don't agree.
What's the risk we put this out on exhibition and then the landowner goes, hey, I'm not happy with this, boom, I already had my HDA secretly ready sitting there, and they lodge it like immediately?
I think the benefit we've got at the moment, councillor, is they've just undertaken that review. They're now very much focused on, well, if council's doing a master plan, maybe we should have a look at the master plan. And we have got a couple in there. We've got a couple of expressions of interest that we know about. We've gone back to the department and said, okay, we're doing a master plan. Maybe wait for the master plan to go on exhibition before you consider it at the HDA. And I must say they have held back on those applications. They haven't gone forward. So really the only one we've had go forward is the Asperia site, and we're working very closely with them. And we're pushing community benefit. And they are responsive, I must say that. So...
I was worried about because of so many increase of population because of this project. And the existing infrastructure like schools and open spaces are not enough for this to meet this population increase. Do you have any plan already?
So councillor, as part of the exhibition, we will also, you know, should council resolve to put this on exhibition, we will be specifically engaging with those key stakeholders. So we will be talking, so in terms of what this master plan can deliver, it's going to, if everything was developed using the incentive provisions, you'd have an additional 1,700 dwellings approximately in the town centre. So should council endorse the master plan to go on exhibition, we would be talking to education, Sydney Water, Ausgrid, Transport for New South Wales. Hospital? Well, we would be talking to Sydney Area Health, but that would be all part of the exhibition phase of the master plan. And then again, planning proposal phase. So there's two components, but with the master plan, we need to engage with those key stakeholders as well. We can't do it at the moment because we don't know what council's going to endorse to go on exhibition. So once we know, and we know that there's a number, potential number of how many dwellings a master plan can deliver, that is the trigger point for starting to talk to education, for example, to say, well, you're going to have enough space in the existing schools in the area to cater for an increase in population.
It's just a question. Any developers coming ready to approach them? No?
No. So councillors, I don't know if you want me to move on through the site. David, do you mind going back to the presentation?
Why is number 2 so short?
So this is 25 to 39 the Boulevard, so it's that corner site and those properties are heritage listed. So one of the constraints with this site is they're all in individual ownership, they're all fairly narrow, small sites. So essentially, to get them to redevelop, we would need them to amalgamate all those sites. And they are getting a pretty significant uplift for doing that. And the expectation from council would be to amalgamate, redevelop, to retain the heritage facades of those buildings and to restore those. So to bring them back. And in our last presentation, we had a render that showed how that could be developed and how they could be upgraded. They'd be all activated, they'd all be restored, have public dining, retail, that sort of thing. So this is probably one of the most challenging sites, only because you are required to amalgamate quite a number of properties and also the heritage constraint. So this might be a site where all the owners get together and make a formal submission to council saying, yes, that's enough, or no, that's not enough, we think we need more.
With that one as well, we own the laneway behind the property, yeah? So is there provisions as well where council could say, oh, we can have some agreement, you can use, like you could have your driveway there or something like that there, but you've got to give us this. Like you can utilise that.
So we could...
I think it's only like, it's probably a couple hundred square metres or something, but...
We would probably look at that as part of any future development application on the site, because we'd need to know in terms of the context of their building, where they're accessing from and what they're looking at doing. But yeah, that's...
Like it's a use, like it's an ugly, it's all just a dirty way.
Fourth lane.
I mean, do we want it to be a service lane? We might want that lane to be activated. That would be something we would look at as part of any future DA. Because depending on their design, you know, they might want to activate the lane and have outdoor dining on the laneway.
And why is this one so much smaller than the other ones?
In terms of feasibility and also compliance with the apartment design guide, this is what the consultants have determined could be feasible. I mean, it might be able to deliver more, but we want those owners to come to us and tell us that, rather than us giving them more at this point, because they need to come together.
Yeah, with the feasibility, does council, and that was one of my questions, I was going to say how, like, yeah. How do we work the calculation of feasibility?
If I can just sort of extend the question to what you just commented on, which is in the same way, we're sort of at that dilemma like Strata again, where we're saying the difficulty here, in particular relating to feasibility, is that we have to see an amalgamation of the properties. So we're going to make it just feasible enough that we think it's appropriate. We're sort of preventing them from ever amalgamating in that case by not being open to something more.
I might hand over to Scott to talk about the feasibility, but in terms of this height and FSR, this is feasible at this point. Now, when we go on exhibition, they may all get together and they may come back and say, we think we can get more, we would consider that.
But only if there's a community benefit.
Yeah, we don't want to give them too much without.
Because it's a heritage listed space that is not as high.
I might.
In the feasibility study.
Scott, can I just throw to you, please? In terms of 25 to 39, the boulevard.
Oh, I think just in, the question more in general, Rita.
Oh, general
Like how-
about feasibility.
How did we,
How did you attain it? How do you
That's-
attain it?
The process around feasibility,
What-
Scott, and
like
the.
did we look at how much it would sell for, like a development would sell for per unit side? How, like what sort of figures are we calculating units will sell for, like that sort of?
So the feasibility analysis was undertaken by Atlas Urban Economics. They're a reputable urban economics firm within New South Wales and Victoria. The advice that they've provided to us is the feasibility and trigger points for development is really different for each of the sites across the town centre. That's based on a number of factors, including the extent to which that site is developed at the moment, considerations around the condition of the site, understanding of the lot configurations and scale, and so factors relating to that influence development feasibility, as does considerations for development costs and assumptions around what sites could sell, for example, residential floor space for as well. Importantly, what land was purchased for in the past does influence that feasibility as well, which is why we're seeing, I guess, quite different rates around things like affordable housing or the scale of development. When we're coming to recommendations around the planning framework, we do need to have regard to what the existing controls are. So on some sites within the town centre, we have quite high FSR limits as they are, so up to 7.5 to 1. So that then influences then the scale of additional development or incentivised development to get the public benefit outcomes that we think are appropriate. In the case of the cumulative impact of all of that development as well, we want to be sure that there's an ongoing good degree of amenity within the town centre itself, as well as in terms of any impact to surrounding residents and landowners, for example, with regard to overshadowing. We also consider general bulk and scale, and how does that size of development feel at ground plane level for pedestrians, for shoppers and diners that are moving through the town centre as well. But going back to the feasibility question, it is site specific and it's based on the particular conditions pertaining to those sites as well.
But I don't know if again extends the question a little bit, but
Speak up, JP, it's really.
thanks for that, Scott. I just thought to extend the question a little bit, and maybe a little bit more to the point of what I think Councillor Blackmore was just touching on, which is, in a sense, whatever calculation may have been done to determine feasibility, is that what we think is profitable for current owners and future developers, plus X percent, or I mean, what does that calculation kind of look like a little bit more transparently?
So typically there would be a profit margin built into the feasibility analysis. Typically that's around 20%. Where sites are required, or we're assuming that they'll be amalgamated, such as the heritage shops on the boulevard. There's also an impact in terms of the price assumed to be paid for those sites as well, because of relative inconvenience, or to be able to bring those sites together as well. So there's a range of factors that go into the build-up of that feasibility analysis.
Thank you.
Yeah, in that case, there'd been an amalgamation premium on that site, because those sites, a number of sites need to be amalgamated to be able to trigger those higher controls.
I guess in other words, is what we're saying this is the best we can get away with? This is the least we can get away with providing?
Well, I think it's the starting point for discussion with the landowners. Because what you don't want to do, councillors, is you don't want to give them too much to begin with. Without understanding what additional benefit we could get out of that development site.
I guess the fear is just still there of their potential turn to the HDA though, is that not?
Well, that's going to happen regardless. I suppose the closer we get to endorsing a draft master plan to go on exhibition, and this is what we've been saying to the department, is we're working on a master plan, we're going through a process with our councillors, we're hoping to have it endorsed later this year. I think what that's done is that's triggered them to hold back on putting those expressions of interest through the HDA. We have no control over their process, unfortunately. Like I said, we actively respond, so any EOI that comes in is sent to me and we will respond to it. So we'll either say, you know, we don't agree for these reasons, we want you to hold off because we're doing a master plan, because we are getting them across the LGA.
Yeah. Mostly in Strathfield.
No, they're everywhere. And we can only respond to the EOIs. We don't have any input when the EOIs go to the HDA, because council's not involved in that process. But we are very, very active. As soon as we find out that there is one that they've put in, we will make a submission generally on that. And most of those submissions are around delivery of community benefit, because all of them are seeking additional uplift in FSR and height, basically for nothing. And they're not providing the community with anything in response to that addition. And so I suppose this is the premise of the master plan as well. So the work that Hassel and the sub-consultants have done, what we're presenting with the key sites is feasible for a developer today. That's not to say that post-exhibition we don't come back because we've received a submission from all the landowners and say we could get more on that site and we could deliver more, that we wouldn't look at that. That would then go into the final master plan, and that would inform the premise of the planning proposal that we do next. So just because we're exhibiting a draft master plan with heights and FSRs doesn't mean it's locked in. It can be changed post-exhibition.
Yeah.
And councillors can make that decision. So the officers will come back with all the submissions. Where there's submissions by groups or developers, our consultants will review those and do feasibility analysis on those proposals, and that information will be brought back to council to make a decision on. We'll make a recommendation, but it's up to council to make that decision.
I think we just touch on the feasibility. Just to be more specific, because I don't think, I get how a feasibility is conducted, but the thing is, it's more about, are we looking at, what sort of build cost are we looking at? I assume there would be a calculation where we have a proposed build cost on the property, a proposed purchase per unit size, things like that. So is that, does that take into account, if it takes them 5 years to put a site like this together, for example, or that's more like,
Yeah.
I can,
I mean, the difficulty, and
sort of
Scott,
thing.
jump in, but I suppose the difficulty with feasibility, and Atlas, as Scott said, are very experienced in doing that type of analysis. We are doing that analysis based on today. This environment's changed very rapidly since COVID. The cost of building, cost of land might drop now in terms of government reform, but we can only do feasibility at a point in time, and that's why I suppose it's so important that, we can get a plan on exhibition, because if a developer's really interested, they will go away, they will do their own feasibility, and as Scott said, as someone who's owned land for 20 years, that land's not going to owe them as much as someone who purchased the land last year. Yeah, in terms of feasibility, and Atlas have looked at that as part of the work that they've done.
But yeah, a lot of owners, whether it's a shop or whether it's a unit or something like that, unless they got crazy money, will not sell because they're going to pay it all in tax, in capital gains tax. So does it the feasibility take into account like the crazy owner percentage, whatever that is? It won't happen if you can't pay out crazy.
And that for a site like this, that is a challenge, because you might get 6 out of 7.
It's the easiest way to explain it.
And it might be the owner in the middle of that development site that's asking for 4 times market value. Yeah, and they will do that.
Yeah.
But, should council be giving them what they want to negate that? Really, that's up to them to come to us. They might all be talking now. They might have pulled together a development site, but they might come to us and say, look, 9.75 to 1 isn't enough. We need 12 to 1. Then we'd be asking, well, how have you come up with that number? Because that's what I ask when we get an expression of interest from the HDA. Had the developer come up with double? And that would be our starting point to work with those landowners, to hit on a FSR and height that's appropriate and relative to the community benefit that they'll be delivering. Essentially what council doesn't want to do is give away floor space and height and get nothing in return.
So they might come back and say, well, we've done a feasibility, and yours is wrong, is our calculation, and
and then we would do an assessment of that. That would be presented back to council, and council would make that decision. Because there might be something here that we've missed. We can only do so much in terms of our sub-consultants doing the fees, and they are very experienced, but there might be something that we don't know. It could be that 4 out of the 5 developers have already gotten together and are already working on a proposal for this site. But I suppose that's the critical thing with the draft master. It's just getting something out there so that the officers we can start talking to the landowners.
I do agree. Whatever we put out there, builders will come back and they'll say, no, we need more. No matter what.
No matter what.
And then we'll be
Especially
asking,
the
well, why? Why do you need more? What do you need?
Yeah.
You're not just getting floor space and height for nothing.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the key message is, if we want to make the Strathfield Town Centre a great place to live and work, it needs that community and public benefit associated with development. Because they're always going to come to us and say it's not enough. We know that. It's never going to be enough. But we need to understand and we need to interrogate why it's not enough. Because this is being tested and this is feasible and this can be delivered. Moving on to council's car park site.
Yeah. Incentive model, 43 stories.
So what we're looking at here is the site in isolation could be redeveloped up to 9.75 to 1 and 130 metres with 60% residential, subject to the provision of the incentives, which is through site link, community civic floor space on the lower levels of the development and replacement of public car parking. What we're looking at as part of this is we've excluded to incentivise the community civic floor space. We've excluded that from the calculation of FSR. So what we're looking at is 4,500 square metres of community and civic space, which isn't included in that 9.75 to 1. If it were to be included, we'd be looking at approximately 12.55 to 1 FSR on the site.
Well, that's an incentive.
So 4,500, how does that compare to, say, our library in floor space?
Well, it would be in our library, but
Many
that's like,
library, theatre, recreation centre.
Yeah, I don't know how big our library is.
The exact size.
I mean, it's a significant,
It's a significant space.
and it would be over a couple of levels.
Yeah.
So the site area is 1,600, so probably be close to 4 levels of community, like if you think about the whole site.
Four times that, yeah.
So that would be,
just in terms of the design here though, why, this might be a silly question, but why does the building, the blue level, if you will, the community mixed use, extend further than the residential and retail?
I'll hand over to Scott, but I'd say it's got to do with compliance with the apartment design guide. Scott, in terms of the massing, for the council site, is there a reason?
Here's like only 15 stories.
Sorry, I can't hear the question. Can it be repeated, please?
In terms of the massing, Scott, why are the 4 levels and then the towers set back?
So the location of the tower is based on its relationship to some of the surrounding apartment buildings and ensuring solar access is maintained into major openings to habitable spaces like lounge rooms and balconies, etc. And the scale of the podium, the purple components, which would contain the community or mixed use floor space, is based on the desirable street wall that's consistent around the town centre that's more of a human scale, with then the tower set back from the street edges as well. And that does also help to ameliorate potential wind impacts.
Thank you.
And then just one further aspect, it was also about making sure that the Strathfield Square, if you like, could get sufficient amount of sunlight during the day in order for the community to be able to enjoy that space, that public space.
And just a further question, you would assume that considering where this building is and what it looks like, with the tower, that there would be an amalgamation with the neighbouring properties, which is something that has been visited in the past.
So it's another option.
Coming up.
Oh, right, that's the next one. Never mind, I'll hold back.
So then, looking at these on sites in isolation to council sites, it's 4 to 10, 2 Strathfield Square and 5 Strathfield Square. Now again, with these 3 sites, the issue is amalgamation. So essentially, in isolation as 3 sites, they couldn't really achieve even their current provisions under the LEP. So essentially what we're wanting them to do is obviously amalgamate as 3 sites if they were going to redevelop in isolation to council site. So with that, they would go from 3 to 1 to 7.8 to 1 and 55 metres to 72 metres approximately. To do that, the trigger would be amalgamation, obviously bringing all those sites together, and then they'd have to provide the additional incentives, so public accessible square fronting the corner, retail floor space to be provided on the ground floor to activate those frontages around Albert Road and the Boulevard. And with this site, we're looking at 1% affordable housing or housing for key workers in perpetuity. So they're the 2 sites in isolation, so council site and these 3 sites on the corner. And then we've got another option in there for the amalgamation of all sites. So that would be the amalgamation of council site along with those 3 sites. And what you're looking at here, in terms of the incentive, noting that 4,500 square metres of floor space is excluded from the FSR, but you're looking at 12 to 1 approximately and 161 metres. So you're getting pretty close to that cap, PANOPS cap in terms of the height, and 70% residential. So this would be the ideal outcome, and it would give significant benefit because they would have to provide all those benefits to trigger that additional height in FSR. And in addition, rather than the 1%, you'd be looking at 2% affordable housing and housing for key workers in perpetuity, along with those other benefits. And that's also retaining the public car park component.
Retaining.
A minimum of 55 spaces, public spaces, as part of that redevelopment. So again, this is a starting point. I mean, obviously it's council's land, but it's the starting point for those adjoining owners. We don't know what they're doing. I think 2 of those sites are in one ownership, one site is not. But this could be a starting point for them to come to council and say, we're willing to have a discussion. And with something like this, it's unlikely because we're getting so close to that cap. You know, they may not go through the HDA process. They may come to council and negotiate with council.
We can only hope.
The next site is Site 6, the 9 Albert Road. So this is the service station site, and for a number of years, even when I was here previously, we had spoken to them as part of some of the work we were doing in the town centre. They're really not open to redevelopment. They're happy for it to be a service station. So we're looking at, this would be a significant residential development, and the baseline would be 6.4 to 1 going up to 8.4 to 1 as part of the incentive, 54 to 73 and 80% residential, because they're basically on the edge of the town centre. We've considered that higher proportion of residential appropriate in this location. In terms of the feasibility and modelling for this, we've also taken into account the remediation of the site if it were to redevelop, because that would be a significant cost to any developer. Because with the service station, you've got the tanks, they'd need to be removed, the site would need to be remediated and then redeveloped.
Just a tangential question from me about design, look and feel. Not relating to this particular site at all, but broadly speaking, we're talking about some of the tallest towers in sort of suburban Sydney with some of these numbers, particularly in our precinct. And without sounding sort of, too, proud of Strathfield versus what we see in Burwood. You know, we want to look like them in the future is sort of the point I'm getting at, which is,
We don't want to, yeah?
yeah, correct. Not in terms of overdevelopment or anything like that, but in particular in terms of ugly buildings being in the air, right? And I think with, you know, this is the one chance we have, as Councillor Blackmore mentioned earlier, to ensure that the future of the town square precinct is, you know, well thought out. I recall in Rhodes, I think they had all SSD, everything in Rhodes was an SSD for a period, and all of them had to go through design panels and whatnot. Is that something that could be implemented here?
So, we've already got a design excellence provision in the LEP. You may recall, councillors, we brought a report to you just recently for a planning proposal to amend that to broaden that out. That would apply here. So what that does is, first of all, it triggers design excellence. Second of all, it triggers referral to the design review panel. So we currently share a design review panel with the City of Canada Bay. So any of these developments would go to the design review panel, and that would be part of that assessment process. But that's done as part of the development application. In terms of state significant development and developments going through the HDA process, there's no mandate for those to go through the state design review panel. That's another thing council officers have been pushing extremely hard on. So we've had the Asperia already go to the state design review panel once, and it's due to go back again in August. And the SSDA that we've got in Water Street has also gone to the state design review panel. So we think it's critical that as part of this process and as part of any future development application, they will trigger the design excellence provisions and they will be referred to the design review panel, be it our design review panel or the state design review panel, depending on what pathway they take. So yeah, that is not negotiable. So that'll be written into the LEP as well. So that provision will be broadened out to take into account the town centre.
A site like this, Rita, obviously when we previously dealt with this years ago, part of the concern was about the driveway, having a driveway access on that road. So is there provisions that we can put in to say, like, if there was an incentive uplift, but you had to have, you know, potential access via Pilgrim Avenue or...
So we probably wouldn't mandate that, because Royal Square is a regional road. Transport for New South Wales wouldn't allow them to have access off the regional road. So they would know that at the very beginning. And yeah, we don't need to say anything about that. Essentially, with a development of this scale, you know, you'd go through a fairly lengthy pre-DA process before the application was submitted. And as part of that pre-DA, where we're dealing with the regional road, we would probably be talking to Transport for New South Wales very early, or we'd ask them to go and talk to Transport.
But then I think you still have the outcome, like it's just, even if, like the driveways where the petrol station driveway is now on Albert Road, you've then got potentially a driveway in and out on a traffic light.
Yeah, Transport probably wouldn't allow it. Of a redeveloping the site, they probably wouldn't allow those driveways to be retained. Yeah.
So they probably will have to.
Probably the option would be that they have to,
Yeah. It's unlikely.
Yeah, okay.
It's the same on Parramatta Road. You know, they reduce the number of access ways of Parramatta Road, and that comes from Transport for New South Wales. They essentially don't want access from any of their regional roads because it slows down traffic. That's the issue. Site 7's 2 Royal Square. So with this one, there has been an EOI that's gone into the HDA. Hasn't progressed at this stage, so we don't know, in terms of the EOI, we don't know what they're proposing in terms of client and FSR, because that information wasn't disclosed as part of the EOI. What we're proposing is essentially doubling their FSR from 3 to 1 to 6 to 1, and their height to 70 metres and giving them 70% residential. With this site, because it's such a key commercial site in the town centre, we are asking as part of the incentive that they retain the existing commercial floor space within that development as part of any future development. But we're saying that 500 square metres of that floor space can be excluded from GFA. So 500 square metres of that commercial floor space can be excluded from GFA. They do have a current DA on the site to refurbish. They did activate that and commenced works, but they've now stopped, and I'm thinking they've stopped because they're waiting to get a decision from the HDA. That hasn't progressed and it's been a couple of months, so I don't know. In our submission back to the department on the HDA, we were very strong about saying to them, we're currently preparing a master plan and we'd prefer for you to defer your decision until you can get the master plan on exhibition. But I'd say these developers will be speaking to us once we put the plan on exhibition. They have reached out in the past just to understand where the master plan's at. So, yeah, I think. And yeah, they might come through council rather than going through the state pathway. And then the last site, which is 39 Boulevard and 12 Churchill, which is the Aspiria site on the corner of the Boulevard and Churchill Avenue. So this one is a declared SSDA, so it went through the HDA process, and they've got a declaration to proceed to a state significant development application. What I understand their timing is that the DA needs to be lodged by August. The state significant DA needs to be lodged by August for them to meet the criteria. They have been speaking to council and we've been working with them. As I said, they've already been to one state design review panel. We don't know the details of their height and FSR. We've yet to share that with them, and that's not in the documentation that's publicly available. But what we're looking at is a floor space of 13 to 1 and a height of 106, which I think from the plans that I've seen, the height is significantly less than what they've proposed, but I don't think they can achieve their FSR within that height that they're proposing. So the height that they propose as part of the state significant development is essentially capping the PANS ops. And the State Design Review Panel had a number of concerns about both their height and FSR when it first went to the panel. So they've now gone back and they're working on a revised concept.
So what was the community benefit that we've received on that one?
As part of the SSDA?
Yeah.
At this point, nothing.
More housing.
More
housing. They're all saying there.
But, I mean, we are talking to them and they have been open in discussing provision of community benefit as part of the SSDA process. But as part of what we're proposing here, we're obviously locking it in as part of the incentive provisions. So what we're looking at is the delivery of some sort of community benefit in the form of public domain upgrades to the footpath and potentially the square. That their parking be provided in the basement because this is such a key site because of its proximity to the square. We don't want parking at grade and we really don't want sleeved parking on the upper levels. I mean, you can sleeve parking and it not be visible, but we prefer for it to be in the basement, and that is what they're looking at as part of their development.
In terms of a driveway, there's no driveway onto that site at the moment. Would that be awkwardly positioned?
So
or just out of curiosity, lane, for example, from the back somehow connecting to that side?
Yeah, so what they're looking at is to the rear of their site, having a driveway coming out at that intersection of Parnell Street.
Oh, right, okay.
So it wouldn't be on the Churchill Avenue frontage.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be on the boulevard?
No, it was on the boulevard to the north of the site, adjacent to Parnell.
Yeah.
Hang on, sorry, to the north of the site adjacent to Parnell.
So their entry and exit point would come out at that intersection. So you've got Parnell on the Bellwood Council LGA. So it would basically be at that point there.
And entered through Parnell Street.
Well, that's what they, so they're having to resolve, that's the only, that's the only, we prefer it on the boulevard as opposed to Churchill. But Bellwood Council has significant concerns with their proposed entry and exit point. Just because of the configuration out onto Parnell and the turns. So, I mean, that's something we need to work
Add an extra point to the traffic light.
And their proposal currently is looking at 5 levels of basement. Whether or not it ends up.
If we have flooding, if there's a will.
Well, we've raised it with the department, so that is an issue that the department's well aware of. That's not to say their proposal will progress. And like I said, they've had to go back and rethink a couple of things because of comments they received from the State Design Review Panel.
I don't want to excite Councillor Kim too much, but I noticed the exclusion FSR calculation for below ground shops.
Yes. So we're looking at 1,000 square metres of retail. If they provide that below ground, so at the basement level, that 1,000 square metres is excluded from the 13:1 FSR. And that's to encourage that below ground retail.
So that's what I was, like, I think it was that one, I think it was our council site has it as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously, I think councillors express, potential for underground where the square is. So that's, yeah, like, is that potentially, like, obviously, well, trucks coming later, but potential connections through the
So
station?
option 3, which will be the next presentation we bring to councillors, is looking at that undergrounding option. It's not to say that, I mean, we're promoting it and we're making it as an incentive because we're not including in the floor space, but essentially we can't force a developer to do that.
We have to ask them. We give them so much.
Yeah.
So give them the incentive, but we can't make them do it.
Let them do it. Let's do it.
But it would be to their benefit because it's not included in the floor space.
Your area, everyone, how can we, have age population?
So we are looking at it.
Connectivity is very important.
So if there weren't any other questions around the key sites, I'll move on. Okay, so changes to car parking. So this might be one that we thought we'd flag. So we're looking at car parking requirements that are generally reduced in the town centre because of their proximity to the railway line and to accessibility to public transport. The rates that we're looking at are the rates consistent with what has been approved in the Homebush Todd precinct, which is another high density precinct. And generally it is the rate that has been endorsed by the state government across all the Todd precincts. So it is substantially less to what we currently require, but it's consistent with best practice for a high density precinct because of its proximity to the railway station.
But people live there, not only transportation, they go somewhere else, they need a car.
Yeah, weekend.
The other thing we're looking at, councillors, is that, so developers are provided with a maximum control. That means should they choose, they may not provide any parking on site. It will essentially be down to the developer. And in my experience, they will generally provide the maximum. So they'll provide what's required here. What we're proposing is that the car parking will be what's called unbundled car parking. So as part of a development, they might provide 300 car parking spaces, but those car parking spaces aren't specifically allocated to individual units. But if you as a purchaser of one of those units, you might be purchasing a 3-bedroom unit and you want 3 car parking spaces, you can purchase those 3 car parking spaces to go with.
Even 3 bedrooms, you don't give us, your plan was not giving a 3 car park. No.
So for 3 bedrooms,
They're giving you a bundle.
in 3 bedrooms, you're getting 1.2 spaces per dwelling. So if you add up the whole development, there's 100 units, based on the configuration of each of those units, so the number of those units, they would provide a total number of car parking, but it may be that a 1-bedroom unit gets 1 parking space, 3-bedroom unit might get 4 car parking spaces if the owner wants 4 car parking
In
spaces.
this case, we really need a public parking, public parking space. At night, maybe the children come visit downsizers, they come to the apartment, then the children come and visit parents.
Yeah. Just with that, like this, like unbundled parking, so does that mean that like each parking lot will have its own title? So someone's buying a unit, it'll be like, oh, lot 39 and lot 302, 303, 304, 305.
So around the detail of how that strata would look like, each of those car parking spaces would be individually identified on the strata plan. And a purchaser could come in and say, well, I've got a 3-bedroom unit, I want to purchase 4 car parking spaces. So,
Or 10. Or
10, or however many. They would then be allocated to that unit as part of that owner's strata.
so what?
It could be 5 stratas. So
How many visitors parking they give? How many percentage?
Visitor, you've got 0.1 per dwelling. So that would be overall the number of units, and you would multiply that, and that would be provided as visitor parking. So that would be accessible to visitors.
So yeah, what just trying to like to understand, someone goes, they're selling the units, and let's say they're selling them before they're completed, and then someone says, oh, I want a 2-bedroom unit, and I want 4 car spots. So you then, like, let's say that's unit 72. You'd say, oh, that's lot 72 is a unit and 4 car spots.
Might be.
Like, does that get?
1, 2.
Say, is that how they then strata it later?
Yeah.
So you can't actually then, you can't swap and change the spots.
Well,
is
then
that?
you'd be selling a car parking spot.
Well, you could theoretically
separate titles.
you could then, you could sell, it's separate titles, you could sell the
That's a bit.
common, not
And
the.
how does that work with rating?
With rating,
Because we have a minimum rate.
I'm not sure how. We'd need to.
The car park.
So it is in council rates.
Yes.
Yeah.
But does the car park
I'd need
count?
to have a chat to finance and work out how we would rate,
Exclude car spots.
or whether or not we could rate the
Does it
car
include car
parking.
slots?
No, it's a separate lot.
You know, it's included in your strata, because if you've got 2 car spaces,
It is currently, but.
We had that issue at 81 to 86 Corrali Avenue, where when we introduced the minimum rate, a lot of the lot owners had separate car spots on different titles, so they were getting charged a minimum rate. And then we had to join it. Isn't it?
Then somebody will.
So you can charge a minimum rate.
Yeah.
So through the chair, you can charge a minimum rate. My recollection is we already have a policy in place where that gets waived. So
They've got to.
for the additional car space. So
For the additional car space.
my understanding is I think they still pay a minimum rate for 1 though.
So they would pay a minimum rate for their apartment, theoretically, and for 1 spot.
But I'd have to double check the policy. But it is written into the revenue policy.
The developers can sell the car park space separately from the apartment. Who doesn't own the apartment can buy the parking space only?
That's what we're proposing, councillor.
Yeah, okay, possible?
yeah.
So it's called unbundling, so they do it.
We make business.
You already see them being
that's what-
rented out.
I don't like it.
People
They're
are
already
already
rented.
rented. They already do
Right,
that.
haven't you said all the
stuff.
time?
They already do it. People try and make money no matter what.
Someone lives there with 4 cars, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, no, guy that does it for like, he's got like a collection.
What's the reason for,
Oh, no.
what's the reason for this, like for the unbundling?
For the unbundling?
The explanation.
It's currently best practice for high-density residential development. We don't have to do that. We don't have to unbundle. It's just the proposal that we were looking at. Again, we could go out on exhibition and seek feedback specifically on whether we should or shouldn't unbundle car parking. But it's basically giving them the flexibility.
I guess what's the other option? Half of the one-bed flats have no parking spots and half do. And you buy one depending on what you want.
Well, generally you go to the whole number.
So half is one anyway.
Well, if you weren't unbundling, because this would be looking at a proposal where you're looking at the overall, so you've got 200 car spaces for however many units, and then they're allocated throughout the strata per, because maybe some of the one bedrooms won't have any parking.
Yeah.
Someone might go in there and say, I don't need a car park.
I do think though that like we are trying to promote this being, I mean, Councillor Blackmore said in the past we want the shopping centre to look like Chatswood Chase. I think we should be thinking the same thing about Woodland Drive, that's right. I think we should be thinking the same thing, or my perspective is that we should be thinking the same thing for the apartments. They should be, luxury apartments, they should be premium, they shouldn't be, dodgy, no one wants to live there sort of units, some of which do already exist in Strathfield. And so, I don't think someone who wants the penthouse is going to spend a few $1 million on a 4-bedroom penthouse in Strathfield and then have, 1.5 car spots downstairs. It just sort of seems a bit impractical and unfeasible as well.
They might want 6 spaces for the penthouse.
Sure.
So this gives them that opportunity.
But so would more parking spaces.
Yeah. But that then also impacts the feasibility.
Sure, that's true,
So,
yeah.
This is balancing with feasibility and also giving property owners an option as to whether or not they want car parking or not and how many they want.
Yeah.
Do we need to have a maximum rate? Because I would have thought we had a minimum rate and then they can do more than that. Or do whatever they want.
So the reason we've gone with maximum, as I said, is it's currently consistent with what we've done, or what the state government did in the Homebush Todd. So we've just aligned it with that because we can justify that is the reason. Council can make a decision to go with a minimum. It's up to council.
Thank you, Rita. Councillors, if there are no more...
There's one more to go as well.
I might just quickly go through the affordable housing for key workers. So essentially there is a need, and the need is based on essentially the key workers. So we've got quite a few schools in the area. We're close to Westmead Hospital, we're on the train line, so there is a demand. So as I said, based on the feasibility, some of the sites are looking at delivering a component of affordable housing for key workers. Others are not, but essentially that's the background to the reason why. Then just to wrap it up, the development control plan, so that was the master plans endorsed, and we're working on the planning proposal, but some of the key controls that we'll be looking at are things around housing diversity, and that's something council's resolved in the past to include. We'll have controls related to flooding because we need to respond to that as part of the state government requirements, sustainability and connection to country.
Do that, Rita, because we did ask for that to be removed. So why does that come back into the...
So in terms of the connection to... So that was something that was identified as part of the key directions report.
I think it was removed from the key direction.
I thought you changed it to just be broader.
We wanted about whole history.
Yeah. So it wasn't getting rid of
Just our history and heritage and...
all history and heritage. That was
Yeah. So the DCP, and it's consistent with the design guide for the Homebush Todd, will have a component in there whereby developers will have to respond.
To what?
To connection to country.
That's in the DCP.
It's proposed to be in the DCP, and it's consistent with what the state government has done with the Homebush Todd design guide. So It's just a process that an applicant will need to go through as part of.
What I hear from the building industry, people that I deal with, is that they spend tens of thousands of dollars on consultants to have no outcome, which just adds to the cost of their building. So, yeah,
Suck it up, as Pauline Hanson would say.
it's not that, Karen. Like, we asked for it to be changed, and it's in there.
So should councillors not want to include that in the draft master plan, council can resolve to.
Issue, but we changed it to say, like, to represent the whole history.
So the master plan does respond to the historic development of Strathfield, not only looking at.
Because I can say, as offensive as it's going to sound and whatever, most builders that I've spoken to, they've gone through processes like this, and they're spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on this stuff, and they look at it and they basically say, well, really, like, I'm building something more significant than these, Indigenous people ever built. So why do I need to go through this process, spend all this money, which just adds to the cost of my project, makes it less feasible. So
I think, putting that comment aside, I think the more important point is that council has decided that rather than looking at one aspect of history, we'd look at everything, and one particular aspect has come back here. So it's there's a disconnect between what was decided and what we're now seeing.
So the master plan does look at the historical development in Strathfield. Connection to country is a component that's now embedded in the planning framework at a state level. So there may be a requirement that the state government requires us to put it into the DCP or potentially the LEP. So it's just calling it out as a part of the design process that the state government has embedded, and it's embedded in their framework. So they may come back if we don't include it and require council to put it in. So it's just calling that out. And yeah, the developer needs.
Councillor Bellardi's point is clear. Like, we went in a particular direction, and then it's come back opposite that direction.
State.
Well, it's anticipating there might be.
But we've given there was a direction given. So to me, it should be lodged, and then if the state government had an issue with it, they'll come back to us.
Well, put up a motion. You've got 2 weeks.
3, I think.
Well done. Any more questions, councillors? If there are no further questions.
Too late to put up a strategy policy,
Strategy policy, 2 weeks, isn't it?
Is it 2 weeks?
But we have a late meeting this month. We've got 3 weeks until the next meeting.
Do we need to vote to endorse anything? Do we need to vote to endorse this?
So, councillors, what you would need to do is you've got a recommendation, I think, on the report. I think you would need to move and second it, and then consider whether you want to vote for or against it or amend it.
Councillors, I move PE1. Can I have Councillor Bellardi as a seconder? If there are no further questions, do you want to speak?
Yeah, just amendment point 3. Says the draft council must have been presented to councillors at August 26th council meeting for endorsement. So we should just say for consideration. So for consideration of endorsement to public utility.
No, it's not that.
No, it's something else.
Didn't council too long.
It's all right.
The reaction to it.
Councillor Bellardi, are you okay with the amendment?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, it's going to delay things. If I can speak to the point.
It's coming back.
Yeah, the draft.
Also, but it comes to meeting.
This is August.
Endorsing it now.
Rather than endorsing it now, the suggestion from your suggestion is to.
It's coming to August, so we're going to endorse it now for
July.
August.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with it.
No further questions?
That's it.
Okay, councillors, now I put the motion to the vote. All in favour, please raise your hands. Carried out unanimously. Being no further issues on the paper, I declare the meeting closed at 8:34. Thank you.
Good night.
Please.